Thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited to have you.
Oh, it's so great to be here, Danielle. Thank you so much. This is fun.
I know, I'm so excited. Okay, and you have a brand new book out.
Mhm.
So
I
tell
do.
us about that. I'd love to hear about that first.
Well, it's my memoir, and it's called Beauty from Ashes, Transforming Wounds into Wisdom, Scars into Stars. And I am the very first severely scarred woman to win a prestigious state beauty pageant title as Mrs. Colorado 2021. So I'm very proud that I get to challenge those, our the ideas we have around what beauty really is. And it's based on that we have to work on ourselves to shine our beauty from within.
So let's just start with tell us a little bit about that story, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely. So when I was 10 years old, I was in a house explosion and I lived at that time, I'm in Colorado right now. And at that time I lived in Eastern Iowa. So just on this, I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm girl. And there had been a faulty valve in our furnace, and my dad was trying to get the furnace going. Um, and so he was in the basement. We were having a 4-H meeting. So 4-H is a great organization. And so there's 27 people in the house at our time because we were having 4-H meeting. And most of those were girls ages about 10 to 13. And we were just laughing and giggling upstairs. We were learning how to make cinnamon rolls. And so we were just like our mouths were watering, ready to taste the cinnamon rolls. And that's all we could really focus on. And the company didn't put in that odor that so that you can smell the LP leak. And my dad was downstairs, and my little brother, who was 8 at the time, was downstairs too. And they couldn't smell anything. And basically, our house was becoming a bomb. The basement was filling with the LP. And my mom turned on the water to make coffee. And essentially, that water heater that was on the other side of the basement ignited all of those fumes that had filled the basement and created a bomb. And it just depended on where we were at. So most people had more minor burns, but I was in the kitchen next to the basement steps, and this ball of flame came up and engulfed me from behind. Um, I had I had third degree burns to nearly 70% of my body, 70. I was, gosh, there's so many details of that night, and I remember it all. And it was chaos, and kids were running and screaming, and I was on fire for a while. I didn't even know I was still on fire. I was air cared to a burn center with my dad, and I spent 3 months in a burn center. And for the next 10 years, I was in and out of the hospital for having more and more like skin graft surgeries. And so they would take good skin that I had jeans on that night, actually saved my legs, thank God. But they took over the years and months and years after that, they took skin, creating more scars, more wounds, over and over again. I had about 30 surgeries in those years. So basically, I grew up with scars covering my body, trying to face the world. So imagine middle school and high school. It's a fabulous time of your life. It's easy. There's no
Yeah.
social pressures. There's no no issues, right?
No, no issues at all,
Not at
especially with
all.
that. No.
And before the fire, I was in fourth grade. I had lots of friends. I was popular in my little school. I have a big family. We worked hard together. We played hard together. I even had a boyfriend. I mean, I don't know what exactly it means to have a boyfriend in fourth grade, but but I had one, and I felt accepted in every single part of my life. And then in one instant, my life changed. And I think a lot of people can relate to that because there's tragedy all the time, right? Like and it could even be a really significant blow of some sort of diagnosis and illness that hits you, right? Um, it's traumatic.
Tell me about like your mom and the other people that were there.
Oh man. Well, my mom and my sister had minor burns.
Mhm.
Um, my two brothers had no burns. It just depended like where you were at, like one of those fateful kind of things, like wherever you were at in that one moment. Like I would often think, why wasn't I didn't have to go to the bathroom at that time? If I was in the bathroom, I would have been safe. But, I was right there, right in the middle of the trauma, getting the worst hit of it all. And my mom was very sick at the beginning, but just a burn injury takes so long to heal from, no matter if it's minor, or severe. It just is such a long process of healing. And my mom was just a warrior. She, even though she was fighting her own healing journey, she had to rebuild our house. So she worked with contractors. Once my dad and my brother and I were out of the hospital, she had to juggle doctor's appointments and surgeries. And like, I don't know how, but she took care of it all. Plus family. I was definitely blessed with a fantastic family and lots of community support um, as a whole. Just if something like this was going to happen, it happened in the most amazing place on earth because of all the support and love, faith centered, the prayers, the people that came to give what they could was fantastic.
Let's talk a little bit more about what you said about the relationships, post the event before we get into more adult relationships.
Yeah.
How did that all change right after that moment happened?
Well, part of it was in the culture I grew up in, we just didn't talk about it. Like
Okay.
the emotions part of it. Like I, the expectation was just that I was going to be okay. And part of the problem is I had seen the pain on my mom and my dad. Even though we don't talk about it, you still see and feel pain and know that they're going through stuff. And so I got really great at pretending I was fine. That whole I'm fine answer I got really good at. I was super cooperative because my little brother, who was 8, couldn't process it and he was uncooperative. And so I saw the stress that my mom was already under. And when we had to I had to wear face masks to school, pressure garments. So all this weird stuff on top of it. And so I just didn't fight her, although I wanted to. Um, I gave in a lot. I just kind of wanted everyone to be okay. I didn't want to add to pain. So I did a lot of pretending, isolating. I tried to hide, like I would try and hide at home. I would try and hide, wear long sleeves to cover up my scars and the pressure garments. I would walk around with my face down. I would hide behind my brothers when we were out in, public. And so, um, and all of that I think is a natural reaction, especially by a kid, but I think even adults. But the problem with not talking about it and hiding and all the things created a space for shame. Shame grows in those dark corners, um, and fear. And um, it, I wish we could have talked about it.
Tell me about the fear.
The fear of trying to prepare myself of who was going to stare. Somebody always did, but how awkward was it going to be? What were people's remarks going to be? What were they going to say? I was carrying scars everywhere. So even decades later, it's been 43 years since the fire, and I still get stared at. I still hear comments. And to be able to be strong enough to confront that, it took a long time. So the fear was I going to be able to combat it? What were they going to say? Trying to prepare myself, right, for the worst.
I see that. And you at the time, you figured that out all on your own.
Yeah, I think it's a sink or swim
Oh,
kind of thing, right? Like,
yeah.
and my parents instilled faith in me. I think that was one of the biggest gifts. And my dad got back to life. He got back to farming. He got back to singing in church. He got back to serving community in the ways he did. And my mom got back to being a 4-H leader, and they got back to life. And so I knew that I needed to follow suit. And that was the best thing they could have done for me. Wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Wasn't easy. It was the best. And I'm a trauma mentor now, and a soul strengthening mindset coach and stuff. And I've worked with teens whose biggest issues are their parents who try to put them in a protective bubble. So they don't have the opportunities to build resilience. They don't have the opportunities to understand what they need, where their strength comes from, and to practice those things that build it.
Oh, I can see that where it would have been very easy for your parents to really put all these barriers up to try and
Yeah.
keep you from that pain. I think that a lot of times we think that if we, put those boundaries up that we're actually protecting people from the pain when actually probably you're probably right that what they did and getting back to normal and having you do those things probably was something that did help you in the long run.
It totally did. And, hiding and protecting, it gets you through the day, but it doesn't build your courage. It doesn't build your grit. It doesn't teach you how to navigate those hard moments with kindness, with compassion, and how to build your inner strength through them. So it doesn't serve you in the long run, although it feels better in the moment. And that's why people get caught up in it, the
Yes.
protecting. Yeah.
Did did you have anybody to talk to about how hard it was?
I didn't have any really real examples. No. Um, I didn't. We didn't do counseling. I had a brother who I could lean on, but I still didn't get super real with him. Even my best friend I've had still today, she was my best friend since we were 5. My book is teaching her more about my journey. She didn't know how hard it was because I did. I was really too good at pretending, probably. Um,
So tell me, okay, so you're 10 to 20
yes.
going through the surgeries.
Yeah.
Did you have any romantic relationships during that time period?
Man. Well, I wanted them. I did actually. So it's interesting, and I don't fault this little boy, but my fourth grade boyfriend, when I went back to school, then this was at the end of fourth grade. I was in the hospital the whole summer and came right back, right out of the hospital, pretty much into the classroom again with scars and pressure garments, face masks, splints, all the weird stuff. And that young little boy who I thought walked on water never talked to me again. Not one word. Not we even got married on the playground. So that's a whole nother story. Like he was my forever, right? In my little heart and in my view. And he never said one more word to me. And I know it's because he wasn't equipped. He was 10. No one told him how to. The adults didn't even know how to talk about it. So there is no fault there. But that rejection set myself up um, for a view of no one will ever want to talk to me again. No one will want to hold my hand. No boy will want to kiss my, you know, injured lips. And that was what I believed. And it was hard to accept myself. And that rejection added to that whole desperation. So going from being fully accepted and um, having this boy in my life that thought I was fantastic and most beautiful girl in the world to then ignoring me taught me that's what I could expect. And
Tell
that
me about the desperation for someone to love you and
and desperate in that I thought no one ever would. So if I got asked out, I better jump on it. And it didn't matter what their character was like. It didn't matter if there was an attraction there on my side. It didn't matter if our value systems were in line. If it was a boy, I was hanging on for dear life. And boy, that is not what I suggest you do.
so I would assume that those early on relationships, there were probably some bad choices there that you hung on to.
Yeah. And there weren't very many, but I held on longer, even though I knew like I'm not attracted to this guy. Like one thought I had money and wanted to be with me for what I could offer him and get him out of his poverty. That feels really good too, by the way, to be in a relationship with someone who wants you for your money. Um, there was what I found is I was meeting people in their pain. So the men I was dating, for the most part, had not dealt with their own pain. as I had not dealt with mine, whatever traumas, big or small, whatever insecurities they were dealing with. And we were meeting in our pain. And of course, it's not going to work out, even if it was the most perfect person for me. I was afraid to face my own crap. I was afraid to sit in my trauma. I was rejecting myself and the life that this injury had given me, and I thought I was doomed. So I was wanting someone on the outside to fill that void that only I could fill. So it was impossible. But the desperation was, this may be the last boy or man to ever ask me out. So I better hold on tight, sacrifice whatever within me I needed to sacrifice so that I could say I had a man in my life.
Was there a moment or a relationship where you realized that this was happening?
I think healing is gradual, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to blame when a relationship fails. It's easy to blame the other person, whatever
Mm.
it is. And so I was struggling sitting in my pain, and I would do it in little pieces. I would heal a little bit more, and it just came in little pieces. But it wasn't really, the pivotal moment for me wasn't until I was in my early 30s. I
Okay.
had been married to a man, but he was buried in his own childhood trauma and was using drugs and alcohol as a coping skill to get through his stuff. But I was lost in that relationship. It was not healthy for either one of us. And that became, there was a moment that was very pivotal that I explain in the book. There was a very pivotal moment, something he said that woke me up and became my catalyst for change. That catalyst of, I can't, this isn't going to change. I had a realization that my hope for him, like to become healthier, I was waiting for him to change for me to change.
That's common in a lot of relationships where you're waiting for that other person to change or that other person to fix themselves and not necessarily seeing that it takes two to tango,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We all
Often.
bring our own crap. We all bring our own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, working on ourselves is a lifelong thing. And so it's easier to say, well, if he did this, or if he didn't do this, or if he, whatever, I could still be together. We could still be together, me blaming him, which it's not a fun relationship in any way. But I had to take ownership of my own crap. And that's what I was doing wrong. And that's why I call it my picker was broken, because I was broken, because I wasn't a whole person. I was expecting someone else to make me whole. I was wanting that knight in shining armor to come and save me. That's impossible. After I left that relationship, I found my forever, and him and I have been together for almost 20 years now, and he's my Mr. Colorado to my Mrs. Colorado. And he is so supportive and loving, but he came to the relationship with his own life wounds. And I told him, I said, the reason why it's working is when we started our relationship, you and I had both acknowledged our own wounds individually before we even met. And now we just heal. I can't fix his wounds and he can't fix mine. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, is when we're with someone to fix them. When if we would just look in the mirror, we have our own fixing to do.
What did
Yeah.
that fixing look like for you?
It was a lot of journaling. It was a lot of tears. It was a lot of realizing my own mistakes. We went to counseling for the first time in my life. Like that was, I
Wow.
was 10 when the injury happened, and I didn't find counseling until my early 30s, like beneficial counseling. And that was one of the best things I did, to have someone
Okay.
help me. And if you find the right one is the gift, but have someone who was helping me point out things from that outside perspective. Like, yeah, he's doing this. You're right. He's doing this, but what are you doing, or what aren't you doing? And he called me on my crap, and that's exactly what I needed. And so I started journaling. I'm a runner. Running is I don't run because I'm great at it. I run because it's healing for me. It's how I connect to God. It's where I process. And so I started running more and focusing on that, and like drinking less, and, not doing the things that would cover up the pain, but finding those activities even that would help me dig into it and sit in it. Um, meditating more, and just connecting with the right people. There was so many things that I found that strengthened my soul. And that's what I did every day.
Can you give me a quick example when you said that you needed to be called out on some of your crap?
Oh,
What were a couple of those?
yeah, because I was enabling him. I wasn't
Uh-huh.
became his
Right.
classic enabler. And I also had healing to do that I didn't know still needed to be done. I was blinded by, I thought all our problems were around his problems. And I was carrying trauma. I was being triggered by things. I needed to figure out how to recognize my own triggers from my trauma from my past, from my trauma from my past relationships. And that was not something I could see. Part of it, one thing I learned about my triggers, and it's so important to know ourselves and why something shows up. So when you think back to my the explosion, I had girls, young girls, 10 to 13, running around screaming. And so when kids would play in that screaming kind of play, it it was like nails on a chalkboard for me. It sent me to a place where I would feel reactive. I didn't always yell or whatever, but I could not tolerate it. And I never really understood why until just a few years ago, actually. I finally had my aha moment of, oh, that's why that drives me crazy, because it brings me right back to my trauma. But there's a lot of things that were triggered and we can't define them. And so until we can, I can't tell my husband, okay, so when we're in this situation, I get triggered and this is what I need to feel safe. This is what I need from you to help me feel safe. It's not you. I don't want to be reactive. I don't want to have a heightened emotion or say or do something that I regret because I'm reactive. I want you to understand. And now my kids are starting to understand because I have the words for it now because I've learned how to see that in myself. Like, oh, that's a trigger. And oh, I need this from you, right?
That's the thing that I work on a lot with, partners of someone who's had a traumatic experience is that the trauma survivor often can't put words
Mhm.
to that piece, to what's happening and what's making
Right.
them reactive to things. And so helping partners identify it. So when
Mm.
the reaction is out of proportion to the situation, just noting that and thinking, I wonder if this is a trigger, if it's something that's coming deep from within that is causing this reaction, and separating them from
Right.
that. Because if the partner can also help with that
Yeah,
process and help to identify, I wonder if there's something else going on here. I think it helps the trauma survivor eventually put words to it.
completely. Because otherwise you're just adding trauma to more trauma to a trigger to a
Yeah,
because if your partner's getting triggered because they think the reaction is about them and then they get reactive, it just doesn't help. But figuring out how we can calm ourselves, what works for us, explaining that to your spouse, and go, when this happens, I need help. This is what I need. I need a safe space. So like for me, if we're watching a movie and there's like him and I were watching Yellowstone together, and after I don't even know how many episodes, but the house explosion and
yes.
someone
Oh,
running out on fire, and I said, I'm out. I'm
yeah,
out. And he goes, but it's a really good story. And I go, I
yeah.
can't.
Sorry.
I just know my boundaries and he knows how to respect them and he gets it and he changes the channel. So something like that is on because he always has the remote. He knows I need to change channel. And I think there's such a gift in that. And it used to be like shame or just even digging into, oh, I have triggers. There's something wrong with me. I'm weak or something. How come I can't handle this? It's so important to be honest with yourself and to be strong enough in who you are just to say matter of fact, this triggers me and I don't need to go down that road and I don't want to take you with me, so this is what I need for you to protect us from some volatile disturbing situation that we don't need to go down.
I do think that there is some shame associated with being triggered,
Mm.
and it comes out in interesting ways in relationships. That like where you're deflecting maybe on the partner, or making it seem like it's their fault because of the deep down, again, I can't put words to it, shame that you're feeling, that you're still having those reactions, or that you're having those reactions.
Yeah.
Is that something you experienced?
Yeah. And I experienced shame from hiding. I experienced shame from people's reactions, from people staring at me, from people like there's so much and shame, and why shame grows. I had nothing to be ashamed of, but anytime we are feeling judged in any way, shame pops up, right? And that's a place for it to grow. So for me, talking about it erases the shame. And when I can talk about it with confidence and a full understanding about how I feel, why this is important to me, where there's no questions about it, around it, and I'm just matter of fact, there is no shame. This is just the facts, Jack. And this is what I need. Right. And that's having confidence around it. But we have to sit in it ourselves. We have to understand the why. We have to understand, be able to process, what it is that works, what it is that doesn't work. And so ignoring the situation isn't going to help. It's learning about it and then having the confidence around it to be able to share it and erase the shame and just go, here's the facts.
I think that is so important, because that's exactly what I learned as well, is that if you can just take the emotion out of that reaction and just say, I don't think this is, I think there's something else going on here,
Mm-hmm.
but let's take a break and let's think about it.
Right.
And then you really do just get to the facts. You're starting to get to, okay, that I think this is happening because of whatever. And sometimes I have had to learn that sometimes you never know. There isn't words to be put to it. It was a reaction, and it's okay to not know that, what the reason is or the why of it happening, just knowing that it does, and then being able to work on it in a healthier way.
Mm-hmm. And when you have that open conversation and your spouse is your safe space, sometimes you don't, and you've worked through some of those things enough together, you don't have to have the words to it. They can just look at you, or you have a signal. It could be one word, it could be a hand gesture, something where they know, got it, we're out. What do you need? I'm here. Then they know exactly what to do, because just like, you do a fire drill at home. What do you do? If there's a fire, what do you do? It's the same kind of thing. And you talk about what you need, and they know, they finish your sentence for you. And that's love. Like that's what love needs to look like, is that understanding, that no judgment. I got you, that you're in a safe space. And then you can discuss it later once you get through the trigger, and you can kind of talk through it a little bit more. But
So you were able to do that work in your
yes.
30s.
Yes.
And then you met your dream guy.
Yes, Mike. Mm-hmm.
Mike. So
Yeah.
then what did that beginning of that relationship look like?
We took it very slow because there's kids in the picture. And so he was very respectful of my boys and the fact that I was a single mom. And we just took it slow because both of us had relationship stuff in the past. And we were both conscious of not carrying those with us into this relationship. And we got premarital counseling, which he's like, what? And I go, yep, this is happening. And it was one of the best things. Even he said, he's like, why didn't I do this before? Why haven't I done more of this? We need a checkup, And it's just normalizing the fact that we aren't supposed to have all the skills to navigate hard things in relationships, to navigate the hard stuff of life. And so you just check in, and we did premarital counseling, was one of the best things we did to talk about anything that might come up in our relationship. As grown adults with our own baggage, because we were both in our 30s, right? And wanting to have more children and wanting to add to our family. And what does that look like? And all the pieces and parts of a marriage. And he had done a lot of his own healing already. And we just had that open, honest relationship because we had each sit in our own trauma. We had each gotten to know our own past, our own broken relationships, and we're determined to do better. And so I think we were both ready to meet each other.
That's brilliant. Premarital counseling, people. I love that idea. I'm curious. So, were you able to, with that premarital counseling, really have a safe space where you could talk about your trauma and what you learned from yours that affected relationships, and then also have your partner be able to do that for you in a safe space.
Yeah. And we were able to really get real about, because we met individually and then together. And so we were both able, the counselor got to know both of us as individuals and then got to know both of us together as one and could see where some of those hangups were. And I think even then, I think learning about our trauma and what it does and how it shows up, because triggers aren't just, they don't just develop right away and then you have the same ones your whole life. Like some will pop up and some things are different. You can be triggered by a past relationship that didn't seem traumatic, but it was hurtful and harmful in other ways emotionally. And then that triggers, if there was infidelity or something, and then that could trigger something in a relationship moving forward. And so we got in the habit, the premarital counseling helped us get in the habit of how to talk about it. So then moving forward, we could have our own grown-up relationships around it, knowing what was important to address, and then how each of us better talk to each other, and so that it was well received. Does that make sense? And so we
Yes.
just learn how to communicate in a healthy way, create a space of safety without, my go-to is to walk away and slam doors. And so I know that I can, like if I'm angry and we're heated, right? I know that about myself and he knows that about me. And so he knows if I'm in a place where I just need my space and I slam a door, he's like, okay, she needs her space. And then I have to go apologize and all the things. But we don't do that anymore because we've learned more. But it's figuring, really being honest with yourself. Like, what do you do? Nobody's perfect. Nobody reacts in the most perfect way when our emotions are high. What is your go-to and how can you control that? And how can you make it better? But conversation is everything, and learning about what works, what doesn't work, learning about yourself, and then subsequently being able to teach your spouse what you've learned about yourself.
Yeah, definitely trauma healing and in a relationship is not something that's a project with an end date. It is something that the trauma will always be there, but how you deal with it. And I agree with you that there's different triggers along the way. But if you can create those tools and those communication techniques to identify them, then you can handle any of them that come along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just educating yourself about yourself so you can educate other people about yourself and you can learn about them. That's what a relationship is. But so many people are just dependent on, that other person filling me up, that other person. We have this false idea of what love should look like. And we put a lot of responsibility on that other person to innately know all about us. That's very selfish and it doesn't work.
Tell me about when in this time cycle that the beauty pageant came into play.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna make probably 15 years into our marriage or 10, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, pretty recently. I 2021 is when I got the reign and then
Okay.
when I won the title. But at first he's like, yeah, and he was so supportive. And then the first year I didn't place and I was crumbled, right? Because there's like this thing called a pageant hangover. And if you don't do well, it's like it kicks you in the feels. And so the second year I did it again and he's like, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that again?" And he's so supportive, but he doesn't like seeing me hurt like in any way. And so, but then he was supportive again and I got top 12. And so I got the second year in 2020 during COVID. It was a very interesting year of how we did it, but um, I became a finalist and that fueled a fire in me to like, oh, I can do even better. Like the competitive girl in me, that competitive racer that I am. I'm like, okay, I can do even better. I can do even better. And he's like, oh, honey, I don't know. I don't know. It was a really hard year. Even though I was successful, I still fell short of that crown. And I, had those moments of having to recover. Um, but yeah, he was pretty good. But he would, because I said, I really want to do it. He was like, all right, what do you need? Let's do this. He's always been so supportive. Um, it was one of those things I needed to do to a gift I gave that little girl in me because she always wanted to be on the Miss America stage and knew that I would never. because of my scars. So I healed that little girl and I celebrated the woman that I became through all of the hard work I've done to heal, my broken spirit, and that warrior in me triumphed that day, and it was fantastic.
How much do you think your husband had to play in you getting to that point where you're like, I can, I deserve this?
Well, he saw it before I did, and he has always been on board with any dream that I have, as I have been on board with his. And in previous relationship, I heard things like, well, we can't afford that, or you can't do that. I heard all the can'ts. And after a week of knowing him, I had an idea. I wanted to help other burn survivors. And I had this idea. He's like, let's make it happen. And we had nothing. We had very little. And he's like, we'll just raise money. It's fine. And he helped me put on events and do stuff. So he doesn't, I can't is not in his vocabulary. And mostly because of his trauma and his hard life, his hard upbringing, some of the things that he had to deal with. It made him a warrior too. And we met in that warrior spirit. And he just, without his support, I know I wouldn't have had the confidence to accomplish everything that I have.
I want everybody to hear that this is the type of relationship that everyone deserves.
Yeah.
And it isn't easy,
Mm-mm.
especially if you've had a traumatic past. And doing the work and continuing to work on it in a relationship, it can be done and it can be amazing. And I want everybody to hear that who's just going through the motions in survival mode, think that there's no way out.
Yeah.
There really is.
When you value yourself, you can make anything happen. When you see your own self-worth. And if I would have stayed in the relationships I was in before, I just never would have soared. I never would have lived my life to the fullest. And I couldn't find myself within those relationships. I had to find myself first. And if you need to get out of a relationship to find yourself, that is the most beneficial journey you can take. And having someone to support you and be your biggest cheerleader authentically, and to show up in the trenches, as well as in the spotlight and whatever you're going through, is really where the gifts happen. Like, that's where our power is, when we have those supporters and have a spouse you can really just know that they're going to be there no matter what. And he knows that I'm there for him, and I know that no matter what, he's right there for me. And that's the definition of a marriage to me.
Amazing, amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing. I know that this will be an inspiration to so many, and I really can't wait for everybody to read more in your book. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity. It was just a joy to visit with you, Danielle. Thank you.